My name is Seth Griffin, and this is Thinking Freely. And we're going to be going over again some more discussion and scriptures on once saved, always saved. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be continuing going down the warning passages of scripture and how we should look at these warning passages, if they're attributed to believers, or are they attributed to non-believers? Who are these attributed to? Are they attributed to believers? What kind of effect this will have on them? And we're just going to dive right back into it, trying to make some shorter videos, more bite-sized for you guys to be able to listen to, those of you with more busier schedules. And so, diving into Romans 11. And this is Romans 9, 10, and 11. I believe is a beautiful picture of God grafting in the Gentiles and hardening the Israelites for a season to bring in the Gentiles, just to bring in the fold, bring in not just the Jewish people. It's no longer just the Jewish people, but it's all those who believe by faith. And that is the highlight of 9, 10, and 11, is that it's not just the Jews that are the promised people, it's those who believe by faith that are grafted in as well. And that's what we're going to be diving into as we get into Romans 11. We're going to start at verse 17. But if some of the branches were broken off, and you, being a wild olive, were grafted in among them, and became partakers with them, if the rich root of the olive tree do not be with them of the rich root of the olive tree. Okay, this is talking about Jesus being the olive tree, okay? And there's branches hanging off this original olive tree, which, as I mentioned, are the Israelites. They are the original branches of this olive tree. And right here it's talking about, and if you were grafted in among them, because you are partakers with them of the rich root of the olive tree, do not be arrogant towards the branches. So don't be arrogant towards the Jews, he's telling them. Don't be arrogant towards the branches. But if you are arrogant, remember that it is not you who supports the root, but the root supports you. So he's pretty much saying, don't be prideful. And this is something we all need to learn to try to get better at, not to be prideful or jealous over, especially in that context. I mean, the God of Israel. Yes, that's who he was called, the God of Israel. And he's pretty much telling them, as Gentiles, don't be jealous of the Jews. Don't be, just because God chose the Jews, because now he's also choosing anyone to believe who believes, and you are able to be grafted in. Okay, and this is important. I'm just kind of setting up the context, just reading through this. In verse 19, and you will say then, branches were broken off so that I might be grafted in. It's almost like a prideful thing, like I'm being grafted in, branches were broken off. Quite right, he says in verse 20, they were broken off for their unbelief, but you stand by your faith. And this is what we've been talking throughout this whole series. It's by faith that you stand in this position. It is by faith that you have been grafted into this olive tree. And it's by faith you inherit these promises. And that is the same thing. It just keeps making full circle in every scripture. Just moving all throughout the scriptures. People of faith inherit the promises. Okay, guys, this is super important to understand. Do not be conceited, but fear. Listen, if I have faith and I'm standing in this olive tree and there's nothing I can do to be broken off of this olive tree, why do I have to fear? Like, why do I have to worry about that? Guys, this is the importance of the warning passages. There's so many warning passages in scripture, and we need to heed these warning passages. And who is these warnings for? It seems to be a warning to those who are in the olive tree. Okay, and how do you get in the olive tree? By faith. So these are people of faith. So believers are being warned in this passage. Okay, not to be conceited, but fear. Why? Why should we, why should we not be conceited, and why should we fear? Like, what do we have to fear? Like, we have faith. We're grafted into this olive tree. Why do we have to fear? For if God did not spare the natural branches, he will not spare you either. Behold then the kindness and the severity of God to those who fail severity, but to you God's kindness. If. Now, what do we do when we get to an if word? We realize there's a condition. Okay? Now this is a condition. If they do not continue in their unbelief, will be grafted in, for God is able to graft them in again. That is a beautiful promise. Like, guys, guess what? Yes, I've broken off those branches, and I've broken you off, the Israelites, the Jews, but if you do not continue in unbelief, you're willing to be grafted in again. For if you were cut off from what is by nature a wild olive tree, and were grafted contrary to nature into a cultivated olive tree, how much more would there who are the natural branches be grafted into their own olive tree? Okay, that is beautiful. I want to jump up to verse 22. I think I've actually skipped over that. Behold then the kindness and the severity of God to those who fail severity, but to you God's kindness if you continue in his kindness, otherwise you will be cut off. Okay, guys, like, he is talking to those who have been grafted in, and he's telling them to fear, to behold the kindness and the severity of God. Okay, severity to those who have fallen, those who fail. This is encouraging you to not be prideful, but continue in faith. Okay, this is super important. And we were talking about the other passage of scripture, and this is how most people would interpret these warning passages. They would say, I watched a video the other day and it was talking about this passage, and it says, well, God already says that you can't lose it in John 6, where it talks about, in John 10, where it talks about, I will raise you up on that last day. No one can snatch you out of my hands. So if he teaches once saved, always saved over here, then this we have to try to find another meaning, because obviously it doesn't mean that. And what I'm saying is those passages over there and this passage over here, we can't pin them against each other. We have to try to understand them, obviously in their context, but in light of the Bible as a whole, because I do believe all scripture is given for the edification, for rebuke, for teaching. And so I think there is a way that these go together, and we have to try to understand how they go together. And I think the best way to see them fit with one another is to see the passages where it talks about God-given promises, to understand that those promises have conditions, and you have to meet those conditions. And if you don't meet those conditions, then God can still, just like the Israelites when they inherited the promised land, and just because God said, this is your land, I promise this to you, it is yours, does not mean that he can strip it from them a later time when they're being disobedient. And I believe that is the key. Like, no one can snatch you out of the Father's hand. But guess what? That's a promise to those who believe. And if you do not believe, then you will get broken off. And I think that's what we see here. So we see the promises of Scripture, and we view them in light of the conditions that are, and the stipulations that go with that promise. And we see these warning passages as we should heed these very severely, as it says, severity. Like, we should heed these with all warning. And instead of encouraging people that they can never lose their salvations, we should be looking at the scripture and saying, Paul, Peter, John, they warn people. While they do encourage them with promises, they warn all of their riders and the people they're riding to way, I'm not going to say more, but just as severe and just as pushing and pressing because of the importance of, it seems like they know the importance of how we need to continue in the faith or we will get broken off. And also, as we read all the other scriptures about continuing, he who overcomes, he who endures to the end. And so, and this kind of almost matches up with a passage in John 15. John 15:6, it says, if anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away as a branch is dried up, and they gather them and cast them into the fire, and they are burned. If you abide in me, and my word abides in you, and whatever you ask, it shall be done for you. Okay, even before that, I'm going to start in verse 5. I am the vine, and you are the branches. He who abides in me, and I in him, he bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Okay. Yeah, in verse 6, if anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away. And guys, this is talking about the same thing. Like, this is Jesus warning the people, you must abide in me, or you will be broken off, thrown away, and burned in the fire. Guys, this is warning passages. Okay, who is this warning passage to? Anyone who does not abide. Okay, if you're a believer and you do not abide and continue to, then you will be broken off and you will be cast into the fire. And I think we need to heed these warnings with sincerity. I think we need to take these warnings seriously, and I do think you can have full assurance of your salvation but still heed these warnings in obedience. Okay, that is what I'm trying to get as I read this, and that's what I see as I read throughout the scriptures. Okay, and so let's just continue. We're going to go over some more. I'm just trying to pull out all these verses, and guys, I encourage you to comment, so we can have this dialogue. If you see these in any other way, or if you think that all the warning passages in scripture do not apply to believers, or that they do apply to believers but it just pushes the believer to persevere to the end, like, explain that to me, because I don't see that, and I don't understand how that would work with the scriptures, and how as I read them anyway. And I could be wrong, but I have a strong conviction that I'm not wrong. But I'm open for discussion. Also, for those who are wondering what video is going to come out next, I will be going over the passage 2 Peter 2:20 through 22. And I would maybe suggest that you read these a couple of times before y'all watch the video and ask yourself a few questions. Ask yourself, is the people being addressed in this passage believers or unbelievers? Also, as y'all read it a couple of times, maybe ask yourself, is there anything in this passage that says if once somebody is saved, they're always going to be saved? And maybe the last question to ask yourself is, if once somebody is saved, could they walk away from the faith? And this is just a few questions to think about as you're going through this passage, and I just wanted to let you guys know the future video that may be coming down the pipe.